So, wrapping up Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyata's state visit to South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa reiterated his call that African states must acquire and manufacture their own vaccines. Kenyata had also visited the Aspen Pharmacare facility in Gqeberha. That's where he saw South Africa's capacity to manufacture and distribute vaccines and other pharmaceuticals for at least a global market. For more on that visit and many other salient issues, let's bring in Aspen Pharmacare's senior executive responsible for strategic trade. That's Dr. Stavros Nicolaou, who joins us now via our video link. And Dr. Nicolaou, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for making time. I wonder whether we can begin by just unpacking what the objectives of this visit was. In fact, how are you hoping that a visit like this one will shift the dial insofar as manufacturing vaccines is concerned across Africa?
Ayala, firstly, thanks very much for having me on this morning. The purpose of President Kenyata's visit to the Aspen facility yesterday was really twofold. I think, firstly, it gave a renewed sense of the continent developing its own capacities to solve its own public health issues. We've seen what happened with the vaccine rollout, the COVID vaccine rollout on the continent. The continent has received 3% or less of the global supplies of COVID vaccines, so significantly under-vaccinated at this point in time. And of course, you cannot rely on imports, and you cannot rely on supply chains that reside outside the continent to solve your own problems. So first issue was that. And then secondly, the President recognized the capabilities, the competence and the technology that resides at a facility like the Aspen facility. The Aspen facility, as you know, is manufacturing the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine under contract. And again, what is publicly known out there is that the Aspen facility has produced 100 million or more doses of the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine. So we've proven it on the continent that we have our own competencies, our own capabilities, and we can solve our own problems. And that's very much what he wanted to see yesterday, actually.
So are you able to speak to us about the strategic advantages of any kind of collaboration in the space, specifically between South Africa and Kenya? I guess, for instance, South Africa is home to the Gqeberha plant, and that has its own unique benefits. But when we think about Kenya's involvement in that collaboration, what unique strategic advantages do you think that brings?
Well, I think yesterday was also about partnerships, right? And how do we bilaterally and also more broadly in the continent deepen and widen commercial trade and investment collaboration on the continent. Now, Aspen has quite a big business in Kenya, actually. In fact, out of our Nairobi plant, we export products to most of sub-Saharan Africa, actually. So we already have a footprint in Kenya, in East Africa. We're the biggest player in East Africa. And then we've got facilities in Southern Africa. And I think yesterday was also about how do you deepen the synergies. How do you take more products out of South Africa, potentially market and commercialize them in East Africa and beyond East Africa into the rest of the continent, using the Kenyan business of Aspen as some type of fulcrum into that export orientation.
Yeah, for many of us watching from the outside, it still feels that there's a lot of reliance on the global north to try and get vaccines to where they need to be, even in Africa. Do you, through these bilateral engagements, start getting the sense that that dependence is starting to wane, but not only that, but is waning quick enough?
Look, it's obviously not waning quick enough because there's a couple of other important pieces here that need to be resolved. The first is, again, publicly known. I mean, Aspen is in discussions with Johnson & Johnson. Here, I must commend Johnson & Johnson because they're really the only ones that have demonstrated immediacy around setting up capacity on the continent, and that's the Gqeberha capacity that we saw. But we're in discussions with them on securing a license. Now, a license will give a completely different dimension of ownership of intellectual property. It will give Aspen the ability, if we successfully conclude this license, to distribute the product throughout the continent. And that in itself will be a significant step forward. But the most important thing, Ayanda, is we need to have sustainable facilities on the continent. Now, he's putting up these facilities and these assets, and they're underutilized. So the international and multilateral procurement agencies, as we call them, as a next step, need to start buying these products from African producers such as Aspen, so that you can sustain these facilities into the future. And I believe we have made some headway in that direction, but we just need to close the loop on that aspect as well. So two things here: you need a license, your own product, and then secondly, you need a reorientation of the multilateral procurement agencies' procurement mechanisms.
Dr. Stavros Nicolaou, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. I really appreciate your time on these issues. Dr. Nicolaou is a senior executive at the Aspen Pharmacare Group. Once again, thanks very much indeed for your time.